welcome to Everything Gaming. Today we're going to be reviewing a couple of AA horror games that I have acquired over the last year. The first one we're going to take a look at is Tormented Souls. Now, one of the things I really enjoyed about this game was the fact that it is a traditional survival horror experience. If you're a big fan of PS2 games like Silent Hill or even the Resident Evil early games, you're really going to enjoy this game. It's got a lot of puzzles in it, and they are really well done most of the time, but they can be a bit obtuse at times. The solution can be a little baffling, to say the least. But I did manage to solve the floppy disk puzzle, which I had an advantage because I've actually used floppy disks. Anyway, the game has really good graphics. One of the things I would like to point out is that it has really shitty voice acting most of the time. Pretty much the only character who provides any good voice acting at all is the main character. I don't know if that's done on purpose because they're trying to match the vibe of early survival horrors, or if they just got some pretty bad actors. It's not too much of a detractor for me, technically. One of the things I really would like to point out, that this game is essentially if Resident Evil and Silent Hill had some crazy demented baby together. There's a lot of elements in this game that will remind you of either of those franchises, and it actually has a really good soundtrack. It's just an all-around pretty decent experience, especially if you're into survival horror, so I would probably give this game about an 8. It's not perfect, it's a little rough sometimes, but I felt as a horror fan it was definitely worth the playthrough. So, that's Tormented Souls. And next up, we have another AA game, Phobia St. Definia Hotel. I'm pretty sure I said that right. Apologies if I didn't. What should I say about this game? Well, it had really good tension and atmosphere, and it had some really cool puzzles that kind of generated that aha moment. The problem with the puzzles, though, is there are so many by the end of the game. It does become a bit of a chore by a certain point. There's just so many, and some of them even require you to backtrack quite a bit. Another problem I had is just a sheer lack of variety when it comes to the monsters in the game. Besides the bosses, there's like only, I want to say, 2 types of monsters you'll encounter while roaming through the areas. So that is a bit disappointing. Now, another thing I would like to bring up is the story has a lot of mystery and intrigue at the beginning of the game, but when you've actually beaten the game, I don't know how to say it. I mean, it doesn't feel like there's a big enough payoff at the end of the game. You don't really understand what happened, and that's even if you get the good ending. The bad ending just doesn't tell you anything at all. So I just feel like while the story did have mystery and intrigue at the beginning of the game, by the end of it you're just kind of like, that's it. So that was also a little iffy. However, because of the atmosphere and the tension, and there are some good scares in the game, but with Phobia, I would probably give it about a 7.8. And it was worth a play for me, but it's a bit rough around the edges a lot of the time. Now, the next game is The Chant. And I just want to say, I was surprised by the level of polish in this game. It's cosmic horror, so it's a little bit different. It does have some survival horror elements to it. But what I mean by polish is there is a good amount of enemy variety. I was surprised by how many different monsters there are in this game, and they all have that very cool cosmic horror kind of vibe to them. The mechanics are pretty well done. The soundtrack is really good. I was not expecting the soundtrack to hit quite as hard as it did, and I wouldn't mind getting a hold of that OST. It also has some resource management. You're having to craft your weapons, and so you do need certain herbs and certain things to be able to craft these things, which add an element of terror to it that's very common in survival horror. But you also have these 3 meters. One of them is your mind meter, for instance, and you need a specific herb to be able to replenish it, but if it drops too low, you start to go into a panic attack. And when you're in that panic attack mode, you literally can't fight the enemies, which adds a lot of stress and tension to the game. There's a couple of other meters, spirit meter, and stuff like that you all have to manage and keep track of during the course of the game. Another thing I would like to bring up is their sidestep mechanic. There's a dodge button, and pressing it once will cause you to do a little sidestep that you can hopefully evade attacks with, but in the heat of the moment, sometimes you need a more evasive dodge. So if you press the dodge button twice, not only will she step back, but she will clamber backwards onto the ground, desperately trying to get away. And that may sound a little overwhelming, but it's not overdone, and it actually works really well in ramping up the tension when you're fighting these monsters, and it still provides a decent way to escape out of a really tricky spot you've gotten yourself into. And just seeing your character clamber on the floor even adds to the atmosphere. You know, they're tripping up as they're trying to escape from this monster, so it's just really overall a great mechanic. And this is what I'm talking about with that level of polish. This game is really well designed. And by the way, it has a truly awesome final boss. I couldn't have asked anything more from the final boss. I loved its design and everything. And this brings me up to the story. The story in this game is a little bit of a simple premise, but it's executed well thanks to the characters and their own specific issues that relate to the story. And actually, even the voice acting is really good in this game. It hits the mark almost every time. And so the characters really drive the game throughout the course of it. And so I really feel that The Chant is a great game for horror enthusiasts like myself. Definitely pick it up if you haven't. These are all AA titles, so you were able to pick these up for, I think 2 of them were $40 and 1 of them was $30. That's a really nice price for picking up these games, and well, I got something I enjoyed out of each of them. But The Chant definitely takes the cake as the best one of the bunch, even though I did enjoy Tormented Souls quite a bit, just based on what it is. So I would give The Chant a solid 9. I definitely think that if you like horror games, you should consider picking up any of these, but The Chant is the most worth it. Thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you next time.